Welcome back to the Weber Kettle series brought to you by Fogo Charcoal here on Chuds BBQ, everybody. My name is Bradley Robinson, and today we're going to do our first slow cook of the series. That's right, folks, today we're making some pulled pork. Coming up! This is a pork butt, aka pork shoulder, and this is a pretty small one. This is about a 7-pounder, and that's something I definitely recommend if you're cooking on a Weber or if you're new to low and slow in general, because, well, it's gonna cook a lot quicker. But one question I get asked all the time: I'm new to barbecue, what should I cook first? And the answer is always the same: start with a pork butt. It's a super fatty cut and is incredibly forgiving. It's also a relatively long cook, so it's gonna give you plenty of time to really dial in your fire management and work on airflow and things like that. If you overcook it and it dries out, you can just add some more vinegar sauce to it, and it's still gonna be delicious. If you undercook it, you can chop it up, because at the end of the day, we're making sandwiches here. So this is a great place to start, because the end result is a lot easier to achieve than something like a brisket where you really need that perfect texture and that perfect fat render. Anywho, let's season it up. For our rub today, we're gonna go with 2 parts 16 mesh black pepper, 1 part diamond crystal kosher salt, and 1/2 part granulated garlic. And that's it. Beautiful. Then, simply enough, I'm gonna hit this thing with a little bit of oil, very thin layer, rub it in a little bit so it's nice and tacky. That's just gonna help the rub stick. Not entirely necessary, but it'll help the bark at the end of the day. It's another great reason to choose a pork butt. This is a bone-in pork butt, by the way, which is definitely something you want. It'll cook a lot more evenly, but there's no butchery required, which is why this is a great place to start, you know? Especially with a brisket, having a good trim is a pretty hard thing to master. All right, next up, starting on the bottom. Bottom is the side without the fat cap. We're just gonna go on with our rub. Nice heavy application all the way around, and please don't forget the sides. Beautiful. And because it's a big piece of meat and we have a pretty high pepper ratio in this rub, I'm not too concerned about over salting this thing, so we can go on with a nice heavy coating of our rub. And that is looking perfect to me. Let's fire up the Weber. Now that our small amount of charcoal is lit, I'm gonna go on with a little chunk of some pecan wood. Pecan wood goes really well with pork. We're gonna shut this thing up and get our temps dialed in. That's a wee bit smoky, but it looks like we're holding right around 250, so that's good. Man, that smell brings me back to the good old days. When I first started cooking barbecue in the backyard about 10 years ago, I was cooking on a Weber Kettle. So if you go back in time on my Instagram, all my first posts is barbecue I cooked on a Weber, and yeah, that smell brings me right back. Smoke is starting to clear up a little bit, so we're gonna go ahead and throw on our butt. We're gonna aim the blade bone towards the fire to make sure it gets a little bit more attention. And I'm also gonna throw in my little meter thermometer here so we can keep an eye on this cook. I haven't used a thermometer like this in a long time, so it'll be interesting to watch. But just like that, close her up, and we'll check back in a few hours. Thing's magnetic. That's convenient. So right now I've got all these vents wide open, top and bottom, and it's sitting right at 275, which is exactly where I want to be. For this whole cook, I'm going to aim between 250 and 300 degrees. If it goes a little over, that's fine. If it drops a little lower, that's fine as well, as long as we don't spike it too much or let it go dead for too long. I'll be periodically throwing in little lumps of charcoal if it starts to dip, as well as more wood chunks to keep a good smoke going. And if it ever does get too high, I'll probably choke off the air supply a little bit at the bottom. And if it ever gets really out of control, I got a little spray bottle of water that I can shoot the coals with. But you can also just pull a coal out, not too hard. Unbelievably, we're about 2 hours into this cook, and that first amount of charcoal has just started to dip down to about 200, 220. So let's throw in a chunk. Pork butt looking good. Yeah, these coals are pretty much shot. So we're gonna pitch in another couple of chunks. So simple. That ought to do. We'll also throw in another chunk of wood while we're here, and close it up. Just like that, we're back up to temp. Got some nice, beautiful smoke coming out of there, and we're up to 98 degrees internal on that pork butt. So, coming along. And also, you don't need to have a continuous stream of smoke. You know, once the smoke dies down, you can let it just cook in the charcoal heat and flavor, and then periodically throw a chunk in. But no need to stress if you go an hour or so without any smoke coming out. You don't want to over smoke it anyway. 5 hours in, let's see how this pork boot is looking. Ooh, it's looking nice. Beautiful bark on there. Ooh, feeling pretty tender. Buck 47 internal, about 50 degrees to go. But to make sure it doesn't dry out at all, let's hit it with a little apple cider vinegar. I'm not usually a big fan of spritzing stuff, but on cookers this small, it really helps so the edges don't burn up too much. I must say, that's looking very nice. Great color on there. I'm also just now realizing I never filled up the water reservoir on the slow N Sear. Whatever. I don't mind. I'm not usually a big fan of water pans in smokers. Maybe for a brisket or something, I would fill it up just to have that extra barrier and a little more humidity, but again, I don't think it's gonna make or break any cook. But we still got a few hours to go, so we're gonna shut this down, let it keep on smoking. I must say, this has been a very pleasant cook. I forgot how easy Weber kettles are to control. And having that extra thermometer on there, I can look at it from like 30 feet away. It's great. Had 0 spikes, very predictable, very pleasant way to cook a pork butt. 7 hours in, this thing is looking beautiful, wonderful bark on there, feeling nice and squishy. Reading about 175 internal, we're gonna wrap it up in the old foil boat. That way it collects all the juices in the bottom, continuing to cook the bottom while the top stays nice and crispy, getting that wonderful smoky bark. Back on we go till we hit about 200 degrees internal temp. One thing I've been doing is whenever I add new charcoal to this cooker, I've been hitting it with the leaf blower just to make sure I know it's caught. That way we don't have to have that whole lag of waiting for the charcoal to catch. And as soon as I put this lid back on, I know it's gonna be up to temp. And also, once you get a really nice, dark Texas style bark like that, you really don't need to add wood anymore. The wood flavor is gonna make most of its effect in the first 4 or 5 hours. So from here on out, I'm going charcoal only. So I was planning on doing a Carolina red slaw, but after looking at all the ingredients, I realized that it's just ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, apple cider vinegar, some sugar, some spices, and then I realized I already had all of that mixed together. Barbecue sauce. I made this barbecue sauce a few videos back. I'll just get that all nice and mixed up. Little crunch, little sweet, little heat, little spice. Sounds good to me. 8 hours later, this pork butt is coming off the pit, probing nice and tender. Reading around 200 degrees internal. We're gonna let it rest for a good 20-30 minutes or so it comes down in temp, and then we're gonna shred it all up. And just look at that bark, that Texas style barbecue bark. Gotta love it. Let's shred it up. First of all, we gotta get rid of this pesky bone. Nice clean bone, always a good sign of some well-cooked pulled pork. Oh, just gotta mix it all up. I mean, just look at that beautiful pile of goodness. Want to make sure that bark is evenly distributed all the way out through the meat. Ooh, it's a little toasty. Oh, it smells so good. Nice and smoky. And that's kind of what you're looking for with pulled pork, is not complete mush, but you still got some texture in there, but completely tender all the way through. And to season your pulled pork, you can make a real fancy sauce, or you can just go on with a little bit of hot sauce and a little bit of our apple cider vinegar. Because that's all a pulled pork sauce really is. It's just a little bit of spice and a little bit of vinegar. Mix that in there. There's plenty of seasoning from the salt and pepper and garlic we put in there. Just trying to add a little bit of heat, a little bit of tang. And just look at that. Like, that is what we're after, folks. Come on, off a Weber Kettle? Don't mind if I do. Let's give that a little taste real quick. Nice and smoky, good amount of heat, good amount of tang. I'm gonna go on with a little more heat. Not overly smoked, beautiful flavor on there. And this is where you can really make it your own. You know, make your own sauce, really get it nice and tangy, nice and acidic. But really, it's all about those little bites of bark in there. Come on, what doesn't look good about that? The acidity really cuts through the meat, all that smoky, fatty flavor. God, that's so good. Pulled pork, easiest thing for the backyard. Couldn't be simpler. Ooh, let's make a sandwich. Always toast your buns, folks. And don't forget the slaw, because what doesn't look delicious about that? Let's dive in. God, that is so good. Smoky, tangy, crunchy, sweet, little bit of kick. I tell you what, if you're ever looking to impress anyone with your backyard barbecue skills, this is the easiest way to do it for like 13 bucks for a whole bunch of sandwiches. Can't go wrong with a good pulled pork sandwich. I honestly don't know why I don't do this more often. Unbelievable sandwich. It's so good. And you saw how easily that pork butt shredded apart. I can't express to you how easy of a cook this was. I threw maybe 5 chunks of wood on total. Didn't have any flare-ups. Nothing dramatic happened. It was a very pleasant, simple cook. You just gotta keep an eye on it. Highly recommend it. Now you may want to just fully wrap this thing, make it cook a little bit quicker, but I tell you what, those little bits of bark on the end there with all that flavor, so good. Foil boat method for the win. All right, y'all, that is it. That is how to make an absolutely incredible pulled pork on the Weber Kettle. I swear this thing was designed to cook pork butts. Perfect fit, super tender every time, could not be simpler. And I don't care if you have zero experience cooking in general, you can nail this recipe every single time. It is that easy and that tasty. Highly recommended. But that being said, if you enjoyed this video, let me know by hitting that subscribe button. Drop a comment down below letting me know what you want to see me cook next. If you do give this recipe a try for yourself, be sure to tag me on Instagram at Chuds BBQ. I'd love to see what y'all are cooking. Shout out to Fogo Charcoal. Thank you for sponsoring this series. And until the next time I see you, please go cook something outside. Peace.